Most people think the problem with a narcissist is their personality, but that's not the real problem. The real problem is how they pull you into conversations designed to make you lose. You don't lose because you're wrong. You lose because you're trying to be understood by someone who doesn't want to understand. They want to control. And today, I'm going to show you how to speak in a way that takes that power away. Don't explain, state. That sounds simple, but it's one of the hardest things to do when you're dealing with a narcissist, because your natural instinct is to make them understand you. You want them to see your heart, your intention, your side of the story. You believe that if you just choose the right words, if you're clear enough, kind enough, logical enough, they'll finally get it. But that's not how a narcissist listens. They don't listen for understanding. They listen for advantage. Every extra word you give them becomes something they can twist, question, or use against you later. When you explain, you open doors. When you state, you close them. Explaining invites debate. Stating creates a boundary. When you say, "Let me explain what I meant," you are stepping into their courtroom, and in that courtroom, they are always the judge. They decide what matters, what's valid, what's acceptable, and you will always be tries to catch up. But when you say, "That's not correct," or "I disagree," you are no longer trying to win approval. You are simply standing in your position. There is nothing for them to cross-examine. A narcissist thrives on long conversations, emotional detours, and endless back and forth because it keeps you engaged and unsettled. The moment you start explaining yourself, you've already given them what they want, which is your time, your energy, and your emotional investment. Stating is different. Stating is clean. Stating is calm. Stating is when you speak your truth without asking for permission to have it. It's when you say, "I'm not comfortable with that," and stop there. It's when you say, "That doesn't work for me," and let the silence do the rest. You don't owe anyone a story for how you feel. You don't owe anyone a defense for what you choose. A narcissist will always push for more details, more reasons, more explanations, because they believe if they can get enough information, they can control the outcome. When you refuse to explain, you remove their leverage. You stay grounded. You stay steady. You stay in control. The power doesn't come from being louder or more convincing. The power comes from being clear and unmovable. When you state instead of explain, you stop negotiating your worth, your boundaries, and your reality, and you force the conversation to meet you where you stand instead of where they want to drag you. Control the emotional temperature means you stop letting the narcissist decide how hot or cold the room is. A narcissist will walk into a conversation with emotional gasoline already poured on the floor, just waiting for you to strike a match. They use tone, sarcasm, accusations, and dramatic statements to pull you into a reaction, because once your emotions rise, your clarity drops. When you're angry, hurt, or defensive, you stop choosing your words carefully, and that's exactly when they gain control. They want the conversation to feel intense because intensity creates chaos, and chaos gives them power. Your job is to do the opposite. You become the thermostat, not the thermometer. You don't react to how heated it gets. You set the level and keep it there. That means your voice stays slow even when theirs gets sharp. Your face stays neutral even when they try to provoke you. Your words stay simple even when they are throwing emotional darts. This isn't about being cold or robotic. It's about being steady. Steadiness is what makes a narcissist uncomfortable because it gives them nothing to feed on. When you stay calm, their attempts to escalate fall flat. They may raise their voice, accuse you of not caring, or say you're being rude or dismissive, but all of that is just pressure to get you to crack. If you do, the temperature spikes and they take control. But if you don't, something interesting happens. They start to lose momentum. Their words get louder, but the room gets quieter. You are no longer being pulled into their emotional storm. You are standing outside of it. Controlling the emotional temperature also means knowing when to slow things down. You can pause before you speak. You can take a breath. You can choose not to answer immediately. Silence cools things off. Short responses cool things off. Neutral statements cool things off. A narcissist wants drama. They want reactions. They want energy. When you don't give it to them, the fire has nothing to burn. This doesn't mean you don't stand your ground. It means you do it without heat. You can say no without anger. You can disagree without hostility. You can hold a boundary without raising your voice. The calmer you stay, the more control you have, because emotional control is conversational control. And when you own the temperature, you own the interaction. Use short, firm sentences because a narcissist cannot manipulate what you do not give them. Long explanations, detailed stories, and emotional speeches feel natural when you want to be understood, but in a conversation with a narcissist, they become tools that get used against you. Every extra word is an opening. Every extra detail is something they can twist, misquote, or bring back later in a completely different context. When you speak in short, firm sentences, you remove their ability to distort your message. You make your meaning solid and difficult to bend. Instead of saying, "I just feel like sometimes when you talk to me that way it hurts, and I wish you would be more respectful," you say, "Don't speak to me like that." The first gives them something to argue with. The second gives them a boundary. Short sentences are powerful because they leave no room for debate. They don't invite a back and forth, they create a stopping point. A narcissist thrives on dragging you into long conversations where they can wear you down emotionally, so brevity protects you. It keeps you from getting pulled into their maze of logic, blame, and confusion. Firmness matters just as much as length. A soft, uncertain tone sounds like an invitation to push. A firm, calm tone sounds like a closed door. You're not being rude, you're being clear. There's a big difference. When you say, "I'm not doing that," and stop talking, you send a message that you are not available for negotiation. Narcissists test boundaries constantly. They push, they poke, they try to see where you'll bend. Short, firm sentences make it clear that there is nothing to test. You also protect your emotional energy this way. The more you talk, the more you have to manage your feelings, your words, and their reactions. When you keep it short, you stay centered. You don't give them the satisfaction of watching you struggle to explain yourself. You don't give them the opportunity to derail you. You stay in control of the pace and direction of the conversation. It may feel uncomfortable at first because you're used to justifying yourself, but over time it becomes empowering. You realize that you don't have to fill the silence. You don't have to smooth things over. You don't have to make them feel okay. You only have to be clear. Short, firm sentences tell the truth without apology. They protect your boundaries without aggression. They say what needs to be said and nothing more, which is exactly what keeps you safe when someone is always looking for a way to get inside your words. Never argue their version of reality, because that is the trap they want you to fall into. A narcissist doesn't misremember things by accident, they rewrite them on purpose. They will confidently state things that didn't happen, deny things that did, and twist timelines until you start questioning your own memory. When you jump in to correct them, you think you're defending the truth, but what you're really doing is stepping into their arena. In that arena, facts don't matter. What matters is who can dominate the conversation. They will interrupt you, dismiss your evidence, shift the topic, and keep you stuck in an endless loop of proving and reproving what you already know is real. The more you argue, the more control they gain, because now the conversation is no longer about what actually happened, it's about wearing you down. When you refuse to argue their reality, you take away their favorite weapon. You don't need to agree with them, but you also don't need to fight them. You can acknowledge that they see things one way without validating that it's true. Saying something like, "That's not how I remember it," or "We see this differently," keeps you grounded in your experience without inviting a debate. It draws a line between their story and your truth. A narcissist wants you to feel confused, small, and off balance. When you stop engaging in their version of events, you stop feeding that confusion. You keep your internal world intact, even if they are trying to distort it. This is especially powerful because narcissists are experts at emotional gaslighting. They will insist you're too sensitive, that you imagine something, or that you're making a big deal out of nothing. If you start arguing back with evidence and explanations, you're playing their game. But if you calmly state your perspective and let it stand, you deny them the power to rewrite your reality. You are not responsible for making them accept your truth. You are only responsible for honoring it yourself. Holding onto your version of reality without trying to force it on them is an act of quiet strength. It keeps you from being pulled into endless circular conversations that go nowhere. It keeps you from doubting yourself just because someone else speaks with confidence. Your experience is valid even if they refuse to acknowledge it, and by not arguing, you keep that truth steady and protected inside you, untouched by their attempts to bend it. Refuse to defend yourself, because the moment you start defending, you step into a position of weakness that a narcissist knows how to exploit. When someone accuses you unfairly, your instinct is to correct them, to prove you're not who they say you are. You want to explain your intentions, your actions, your heart. But a narcissist doesn't make accusations to understand you. They make them to control you. Every time you try to defend yourself, you're telling them that they get to be the judge of your character. You are placing your worth in their hands, and they will always use that to keep you off balance. Defending yourself turns the conversation into a trial where you are always the one on the stand. No matter how much evidence you give, it will never be enough because the goal was never truth. It was power. When you refuse to defend yourself, you remove that power. Instead of saying, "That's not fair, let me explain," you say, "That's your opinion." Instead of saying, "You misunderstood me," you say, "I don't agree with that." These kinds of responses don't attack and they don't submit. They simply state where you stand. A narcissist wants to pull you into an emotional spiral where you feel the need to clear your name, to make things right, to fix their view of you. But you don't need their approval to be valid. The more you stay calm and steady, the more their accusations lose their effect. They may try to escalate, to provoke guilt, to push harder, because they're not getting the reaction they want. But when you don't defend, you also don't get dragged into their narrative. You stay in your own lane. This doesn't mean you stay silent or accept mistreatment. It means you stop arguing with someone who has already decided what they want to believe. You don't owe anyone a detailed explanation of who you are. You don't owe anyone a defense of your motives. You know your truth, and that's enough. Refusing to defend yourself keeps you from being emotionally hijacked. It keeps you from chasing validation from someone who uses it as leverage. When you stop trying to prove your goodness to a narcissist, you reclaim your power and your peace, and you show them that their words no longer have the ability to shake your sense of who you are. Redirect instead of react, because a narcissist wants your reaction more than they want any real solution. When they criticize, accuse, or provoke you, it is designed to pull your attention and your emotions right where they can control them. If you react emotionally, you are now playing the role they wrote for you. You become defensive, upset, or angry, and the conversation moves exactly where they want it to go. Redirection changes that. It takes the energy they are trying to stir up and shifts it into something grounded and concrete. Instead of responding to the insult, you move the focus to something specific. When they say something like, "You're always messing everything up," you don't argue about whether that's true. You ask, "What exactly do you want changed?" That single shift takes the conversation out of emotional chaos and into a space that requires clarity. A narcissist is far less comfortable there because clarity limits their ability to manipulate. Reacting keeps you trapped in their emotional storm. Redirecting puts you back in the driver's seat. It forces them to either become specific or reveal that they don't actually have anything solid to stand on. Most of the time, their statements are vague on purpose because vagueness creates insecurity. You start to wonder what you did wrong, you start to overthink, and that gives them more control. Redirection cuts through that fog. It says you are not going to chase every emotional jab. You are only going to deal with what is real and actionable. This also protects your nervous system. Emotional reactions drain you. They leave you feeling exhausted, confused, and unsettled long after the conversation ends. Redirecting keeps you calm and focused. You are no longer fighting for your dignity in a conversation that was never fair to begin with. You are simply choosing where the conversation goes. Even if they try to keep pulling it back into drama, you keep bringing it back to the point. Over time, this changes the dynamic. They realize that they can no longer get you to jump every time they poke you. They may push harder at first because they don't like losing control, but consistency makes the difference. Each time you redirect, you are quietly telling them that you will not be emotionally led around. You are not here to absorb their projections. You are here to decide what actually matters and what doesn't. And that quiet decision reshapes the entire interaction. Set boundaries without anger, because anger is what a narcissist expects and prepares for. When you raise your voice, argue, or sound emotionally charged, it gives them something to push against. It makes the boundary look negotiable, like it came from a moment of frustration instead of a place of clarity. A calm boundary is far more powerful. It tells them that this is not about a mood, it's about a standard. Boundaries are not threats. They are simply statements of what you will and will not accept. A narcissist will often test those limits, not because they didn't understand them, but because they want to see if you will enforce them. If you say, "Please stop talking to me like that," and then keep engaging when they don't, you've taught them that your words don't mean much. But if you calmly say, "If you keep speaking to me that way, I will leave," And then you actually leave. The message becomes real. You didn't need to yell. You didn't need to insult. You just followed through. That's what gives boundaries their strength. Setting them without anger also protects you. Anger drains you. It keeps you emotionally hooked to the situation. Calm boundaries let you step back and stay grounded. You're not trying to make them change. You're simply deciding what you will do if the behavior continues. That shift is subtle but powerful. It puts the responsibility back where it belongs. A narcissist may accuse you of being cold, unfair, or dramatic when you set boundaries. That's just another attempt to pull you into an emotional argument. You don't have to defend your boundary. You don't have to explain it in detail. You only have to state it and live by it. Over time, this changes how you feel about yourself. You begin to trust your own limits. You begin to feel safer in your own decisions. You stop waiting for someone else to respect you and start showing what respect looks like through your actions. Boundaries without anger don't invite a fight. They quietly draw a line and let the other person decide whether they will stay on the right side of it. And that quiet firmness is what makes them impossible to ignore when to disengage, because not every conversation is meant to be continued, especially with someone who uses communication as a weapon. A narcissist doesn't always want resolution. They want attention, control, or an emotional reaction. And when you stay in a conversation that has already turned toxic, you're feeding exactly what they are looking for. Disengaging is not giving up. It is choosing not to participate in something that is harming you. There comes a point when nothing you say will be heard in good faith. They are no longer listening. They are only waiting for a chance to twist your words or provoke you further. In that moment, the strongest thing you can do is step away. That might look like saying, "I'm done with this," or it might look like quietly going silent, but either way, you are removing yourself from the emotional battlefield. This can feel uncomfortable, especially if you're used to trying to fix things or keep the peace. But peace that requires you to stay in a damaging exchange is not really peace. Disengaging protects your mental and emotional space. It gives you room to breathe, to think clearly, and to come back to yourself. A narcissist often reacts strongly when you disengage because they feel their control slipping. They might escalate, guilt trip, or try to pull you back in with new accusations or dramatic statements. That doesn't mean disengaging was wrong. It means it was effective. You don't have to respond to every message, every comment, or every provocation. You get to decide when your energy is no longer available. This is especially important when conversations start going in circles. When the same points are being repeated, when nothing is being resolved, and when you feel more drained than understood, that's your signal. Staying in that space will not bring clarity. It will only bring more confusion. Walking away breaks the cycle. It allows you to keep your sense of reality intact instead of letting it be chipped away by endless arguments. Disengaging is a way of saying that your time and emotional well-being matter. It's not about punishing them. It's about protecting you. And that simple choice to step back can shift the entire balance of power in your favor.